Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Charts with Dan. Today, we're going to be talking about the potential end of Tenet's domestic box office run, as well as what might happen with Wonder Woman 1984, which has now found itself as the only major release still left on the calendar for 2020. We will look at the movies that moved, and we're going to talk about what was at the box office this weekend, what people are seeing around the world, and what people are watching at home. But before we do that, sadly, for the second week in a row, at the top of the show, I do have to acknowledge the passing of someone who, particularly here in the United States, was, I know for us and for millions of families around the world, a daily presence in their homes. Alex Trebek, the legendary host of Jeopardy for over 30 years, passed away after a long and brave and public battle with cancer. He was 80 years old. He had literally been hosting Jeopardy almost as long as I have been alive. I cannot remember a time in my life when Alex Trebek was not on television every day hosting what was called America's favorite quiz show. I love watching the show, and so much of it was Alex Trebek's presence, his persona, the love and passion that he had for the game, the snarkiness that he had with some of the contestants. I love watching the times when he could just cut a contestant down to size with a very quick remark. I actually had a couple of close calls with being involved in Alex Trebek's version of Jeopardy. Mara and I actually had tickets to go see the show, and it took a long time. You had to find windows for when you could get tickets, and then finding a day that worked and a time that worked. And he actually, just bad luck on our part, had an injury where he fell and hurt his head and needed to take a couple days off from the show. And it was the day that we were supposed to go. So they canceled our tickets and we weren't able to reschedule them. And we kept looking for windows where we could go and we never found one. So we were never able to go to a taping. And then I went through, and I was told I could share this, I went through the audition process and made it to the final round of auditions to be on Jeopardy earlier this year. But it is a very long list. You're not guaranteed to get on the show, even if you make it to the final round of auditions. But I had this dream in my head of being on Jeopardy with Alex Trebek as the host, and that dream may come true. Maybe someday I will get to be on Jeopardy, but it'll be a bit of a bittersweet experience because Alex will not be there behind the podium as the host. Because Jeopardy was all about information, I decided to do one chart for Alex Trebek. As I mentioned, he was not just a figure on television, he was a pop culture icon. He showed up in so many TV shows and movies. So these are the top 5 grosses for movies in which Alex Trebek makes an appearance, oftentimes through a clip of Jeopardy on television as the characters were watching it. And the number 1 movie is Rain Man. Rain Man, the top grossing movie. These are not adjusted for inflation, so imagine the gross of that movie nowadays when you adjust for our money today. Then Charlie's Angels, the 2000 version directed by McGee, is number 2. The Bucket List at number 3. White Men Can't Jump at number 4. And Groundhog Day, one of my favorite scenes when Phil Connors has memorized the answers to Jeopardy, there at number 5 with $70 million. But mainly, aside from being a one-of-a-kind game show host, I really think that we should all be so lucky to be able to face our time the way that Alex Trebek did, which was, he made the choice to go through this battle publicly, and I'm sure that it posed challenges to do publicly, just as those who choose to battle cancer privately go through. Each way poses its own unique challenges, but the fact that he was so forthcoming, that he was so positive up until the very end. I was reading that he filmed his last episodes of Jeopardy less than 2 weeks ago. He was working as long as he possibly could, and the grace and the quiet courage and steadiness that he faced this fight with are something that I think we can all aspire to. So to Alex Trebek, rest in peace. Really the face of intelligence for a few generations of Americans. So let's move to the box office for this past weekend, and Kevin Costner is back on top at number 1. He and Diane Lane actually reteaming, Superman's parents, reteaming for a movie called Let Him Go, which is got a bit of a hybrid release. The theatrical window is going to be shortened on this one a little bit, but Let Him Go is number one, $4.1 million. Of course, Kevin Costner right now the star of a huge hit show on cable, Yellowstone. So reading into the analytics behind him, reported on Deadline and elsewhere, the South and the Southwest were big markets for Let Him Go. That's also where there are more theaters open currently. So Let Him Go number one with $4.1 million. Then last week's number one, Come Play at $1.7 million. The War with Grandpa. It seems like it's sticking with families because it's there at number three, and it actually vaults over Honest Thief, which is at number four with $1.1 million. And then at number five, still in the top five, but for how long, is Tenet. It banks another $905,000. But news actually came out this week that Warner Brothers is surrendering a key factor of this race. Now, when we talked about the release of Tenet, one thing that Warner Brothers was very clear about as the movie was coming out was the fact that it was not going to have a normal theatrical window, that it was planning for Tenet to play for far longer than the average release, and that as theaters opened up, Tenet would be there for those moviegoers who wanted to get back to the theater. And Christopher Nolan has said in an interview with the LA Times this past week that he was happy with the performance of Tenet and that he felt like they were going to be the wrong lessons were going to be taken away, and that exhibition was going to be punished because it didn't do as well domestically, did much better internationally than it did domestically. But the fact that remains that Tenet did not perform to Warner Brothers expectations, and they actually announced just a few days ago the home video 4K Blu-ray etc. date for Tenet in mid-December. And so that essentially signals an end to the domestic theatrical run of Tenet, because I doubt that there are going to be a lot of people that would go out to a theater to see the film if they could get it at home. This really is a signaling of the end of the theatrical run of Tenet. It's going to be a disappointing theatrical run if you're Warner Brothers, given the amount of money that they invested in the film. Even though it did do very well internationally, it's not going to be a film that breaks even just with box office grosses. It's going to have to do well on the home market. Now, that may very well be because there could be plenty of people who wanted to see Tenet who are going to choose to watch it at home. However, something that I thought was very interesting was the fact that the retail price for Tenet is quite high. These are the suggested prices. Now, normally most stores and most places are going to sell below retail price because they want you to buy from them. But the suggested retail price for Tenet, $44.95 for the 4K Blu-ray digital combo pack, $35.99 for a Blu-ray disc, and $28.98 for a DVD. Those are all very high prices. So Warner Brothers may be trying to make back a little bit of that money by boosting the price of Tenet when it hits home video, hoping that people are going to shell out that extra money in order to see the film. I remain very skeptical as to whether people are going to pay that amount of money. I think that there are going to be some retailers that are going to have to mark that down a lot, and then that actually hurts them because that comes out of their pocket. So this is a bit of a surrender in the sense that I think it shows that Warner Brothers does not have a whole lot of faith in the holiday box office, because you would think if they did, that they would leave Tenet in theaters, because as box office moviegoing increased, people would be going to see Tenet more. However, the reality of the situation that we're in, especially here in the United States, and we talked last week about the fact that countries are going back into lockdown internationally in Europe and around the world, things are getting worse at an exponential pace here in the United States when it comes to the coronavirus. Now, there was great news today that it looks like there is a vaccine developed that in the early results has a very good effective rate, that we could be getting final word on the distribution of that very soon. But the harsh reality of that is that they might be able to start distributing that by the end of this year, but it is not going to go into wide distribution until next year. And we all knew that. We all knew that with a vaccine, that this was the best case scenario. But this is coupled with the fact that we are seeing an explosion of cases here in the United States, and it really doesn't show any signs of stopping. As a matter of fact, it shows the opposite. So as if we didn't know this already, I think Warner Brothers is acknowledging here that the holiday box office, or whatever hopes they had for it, is not going to happen. There's not going to be a meaningful theatrical exhibition market for the year 2020. And I know that this sucks, but that's the truth. It just, I don't see any way around it right now. Now, as I am sitting here and recording this show this second, Wonder Woman 1984 is still set to be released. But it is the last one currently that is set to be released, because let's look at the 2020 release schedule, and there were a couple of changes that happened. Obviously, No Time to Die and Soul, they've been gone for quite some time. The Croods: A New Age is still set for a release right around Thanksgiving, but keep in mind, that is one of those movies that has a shortened theatrical window, so that is going to be on VOD up to 17 days, perhaps after it comes out, so that's going to be a little bit of money, if there are even any theaters open at that point, and we will see. Free Guy is a big one, and these are both from Fox Disney. Free Guy, which was set for December 11th, has moved to a TBD date in 2021. That is now off the release schedule. December 18th, Death on the Nile, another movie from Fox. That has been moved to a TBD date in 2021. That is off the schedule. We still have Monster Hunter, Paul W.S. Anderson's Monster Hunter, which is on the schedule for December 30th. But when you look at the marketplace now, the only two films left, really, major films, are The Croods: A New Age and Wonder Woman 1984 there on December 25th. Even going into January now, Respect, the Aretha Franklin biopic, that has already moved off that January date to August 2021. So we are now seeing 2021 movies moving out of the way of what's going on. This is a harsh reality, and it sucks, and I don't like it, and I'm sure you don't like it, and the people in Hollywood definitely don't like it, but this is just the hand that we've been dealt. While Wonder Woman 1984 is currently on the slate, I would peg its chances at next to nothing that we are going to see it this year. The scuttlebutt around Hollywood is that it is going to be pushed to next June. I think we're probably going to get that word very soon, and that will essentially be the end for all intents and purposes of the 2020 box office season. It is going to be a ruinous season for a lot of theaters, certainly for a lot of chains. The National Association of Theater Owners, I saw, made another plea to Congress today, asking for help, because there are going to be many theaters that do not make it out of this. But 2020, it looks like any hopes of it not being a complete wash seem to have gone by the wayside. So let's look at the 2020 domestic picture as it stands. And this is likely to be very close to the final picture, unless something miraculous happens, or unless Warner's decides to roll the dice once again with Wonder Woman 1984, which I don't see them doing. Bad Boys for Life, Sonic the Hedgehog, Birds of Prey, Dolittle, and The Invisible Man make up the top five. Only two of those films grossed over $100 million domestically. You see Tenet there at number 8. If it can bank another $6-7 million, it could overtake Onward and The Call of the Wild. But with the fact that we now know it's going to be hitting home video, home media here in the matter of about 5 weeks, how much gas does it have left in the box office tank? We don't know at this point. But this is not a great chart, and I wish that it was better. Let's look at the 2020 worldwide chart, and it's a little better, but not much. Birds of Prey is there at number 8, but look just below it. Demon Slayer, the movie. We've talked about this for the last few weeks. In Japan, has become an absolute phenomenon. It's about to break the $200 million mark and overtake Birds of Prey there at number 8. And this is pretty much just from the Japanese market. This is a phenomenally successful movie in Japan. And so I wanted to take a look a little bit at what this means in the context of the Japanese box office. That's right. You want charts? You've got the top 10 Japanese box office hits of all time, because it's 2020, and that's where we are. So let's look at the top 10 box office hits in Japan. Now, this is in yen. Number 1 is Spirited Away at 30.8 billion yen. And these are not adjusted, so keep in mind that if you were to adjust, and I don't know how the yen adjusts in comparison to the dollar, but a lot of these movies, these numbers will be much different. Spirited Away from Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli there at number 1. Titanic at 26.2 billion yen at number 2. Then Frozen, Your Name at just over 25 billion yen. And then we have Demon Slayer, which has only been out for a few weeks and yet has grossed over 20.4 billion yen. It is at number 5 all-time highest grossing film in Japan. We'll see how much money it has left, if it can climb up that chart, if it can climb over Your Name. I mean, Your Name, Frozen, and Titanic are all somewhat close. If Demon Slayer can get up to that 25 billion mark, it could get as high as number 2. Then Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone at 20.3 billion at number 6, followed by Howl's Moving Castle, another film from Studio Ghibli, Princess Mononoke, another film from Studio Ghibli. Bayside Shakedown 2, which I had to look up, is actually based off of a popular Japanese TV show, a very, very big film in the early 2000s, is at number 9 all time. And then Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, there at number 10 with 17.3 billion yen. So we are seeing signs of life in box offices that are not the United States or many other countries, but here it does look like it is a bit of a fait accompli as far as what is going to happen with the 2020 box office. I think we're all just sitting here kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop with Wonder Woman. Let's go back to a time when people could go to the movies, and we are going back to the box office in 1997, and this is such a great time capsule for what... Imagine going to the movies this weekend in time and having these selections. First of all, we're talking about the 23rd anniversary this past weekend of Starship Troopers opening. In week 1, it opened to $22 million. It was a box office disappointment, somewhat, at least domestically. It was a movie, however, that has grown in estimation over the years. Then you have Bean, starring Rowan Atkinson, the big kind of breakout. You saw him on PBS. Now you can see him in movie theaters nationwide. It was in its 4th week. However, it opened in limited release. This was its first week in wide release. So that's why, even though it's in week 4, it's there so high with 12.7 million at number 2. Then you have the 4th week of I Know What You Did Last Summer, which introduced us, or at least got us more familiar with so many television and movie stars from the mid to late 1990s. Then The Devil's Advocate in its 4th week with Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino. It is pulpy, it is over the top, and I love every second of that movie. And then you have from Richard Gere, Red Corner. Very serious man, Richard Gere. Very serious man, making very serious films, particularly in the mid to late 90s, at number 5 in its 2nd week. However, there were a lot of other films, if you want to look at the box office, notable films that also celebrated anniversaries this past week. 1976, another year. Look at these selections. The same weekend, Network, Carrie from Brian De Palma, and John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13 all open in the same weekend. Then in 1994, Interview with the Vampire and The Santa Claus open. Keep in mind that Santa Claus the person is spelled with no E, Santa Claus the Claus is spelled with an E, and I blame that movie for everyone spelling Santa Claus the person wrong for almost my entire life. Then 10 years later, in 2004, The Incredibles opened to $70+ million at number 1. Pixar, again, we talked about Monsters, Inc. a couple weeks ago. Pixar, a box office juggernaut for quite some time now. And then 8 years ago, 8 years ago, it's hard to believe and easy to believe at the same time, Skyfall began setting James Bond box office records. Of course, Skyfall would kind of rewrite what a James Bond film could do domestically and globally, went on to make over $1 billion at the box office. But it is celebrating its 8th year release anniversary here in the United States. So let's see what people are watching at home, and as always, we'll start with Amazon, and topping their chart is The Craft Legacy, the Blumhouse sequel to The Craft from the mid-90s. Then we have Love and Monsters and Antebellum, The Doorman and Game Night, new to the list this week, Mulan, the 2020 version, and then we have Spell, which was on the iTunes charts last week or the week before, The King of Staten Island, The Karate Kid 1984 at number 10, and then at number 9, The Purge Election Year, which I don't know if that was passing the time, if it was wishful thinking or a documentary. I don't know exactly what it was, but people were, for some reason, in the mood to watch The Purge Election Year this last week. It's there at number 9. Looking at the top 10 over on iTunes, the number 1 film is The Informer, which is a new movie. That's an action film starring Rosamund Pike, Joel Kinnaman, Common, Ana de Armas, and Clive Owen. Then at number 2 is The Rental, directed by Dave Franco. We talked about this movie quite a bit back in the summer because it was doing well at the drive-in theaters. It was a $1 rental on iTunes this week. It actually got pretty good reviews, so if you can still grab it for $1, that might be a nice value pick for you. Then at number 3 is After We Collided, Ava, starring Jessica Chastain, which has been on the iTunes charts for a bit. Mortal, starring Nat Wolff, is there at number 5. Then at number 6, Battle of the Bulge Winter War, which is from director-star Stephen Luke and has Tom Berenger in it. It's actually a sequel to a 2018 movie called Battle of the Bulge Wonderland, which I had never heard of, and I've never heard of this one either, but somebody on iTunes has because it's on the top 10 chart. Then at number 7 is director Mel Gibson's Apocalypto. At number 8 is a movie called The Dark and the Wicked, which is from The Strangers and The Strangers Pray at Night director Brian Bertino. At number 9 is Love and Monsters. And at number 10 is Antebellum. And finally, let's see what people are watching over on Netflix. The number 1 film is The Impossible, starring Naomi Watts and Ewan McGregor and a very teeny tiny Tom Holland. Number 1 on the Netflix charts. Then at number 2 is Operation Christmas Drop. Tis the season to put Netflix holiday movies you've never heard of in your top 10. Then at number 3, Mile 22, starring Mark Wahlberg. Not a great movie, but some pretty decent action. If you're just looking for a kind of a brainless action movie, I'd recommend throwing that on, I guess. Then at number 4, Knock Knock, which is a movie starring Keanu Reeves, directed by Eli Roth, that came out in 2015 that I've never heard of. So Knock Knock at number 4, Holiday at number 5. Emma Stone in Easy A is on the chart there at number 6, followed by Midnight at the Magnolia, which is a Netflix rom-com. Then The Grinch, Over the Moon, both holdovers from last week. And at number 10, Paul Blart Mall Cop, because it's 2020, and why not? That's all I've got with the box office this week, but there is one other thing that I wanted to mention, which is that these past several days, as have so many people in this country and around the world, I have been glued to the television as election results came in, and there was somebody that I've actually never heard of that became a nationwide sensation this week. I'm talking, of course, about MSNBC map guru Steve Kornacki, who is very good at his job, was throwing out numbers and zooming in on stuff and doing facts and doing figures, etc. And I've seen so many people talking about him on social media and elsewhere, and I gotta admit, I'm a little bit jealous. I see you, you're coming out of nowhere, I've never heard of you before, and all of a sudden you're the new charting king of the United States. Well, you know what? I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm sure you have too, and I just didn't know who you were until last week, but that doesn't change a thing. So watch your back, Kornacki, because you're on my turf now. And if you keep snaking my game, then I'm going to make a chart about you making a chart about the top 5 counties in Pennsylvania. And then you're going to have to chart my chart, and we're just going to both get incepted. And we're just going to get sucked into a black hole of charts. So you know what, Steve Kornacki? We're enemies now. That's right. We are nerdy enemies. So look out, because I'm going to resent you privately. Blood feuds aside, that's all I've got on this week's Charts with Dan. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see even more of what I'm doing, there's a few different things you can check out. First and foremost, please check out my podcast, All My Movies, where I tackle a movie from my collection every week. I'm actually very excited this week because it features a movie that we mentioned earlier in the show, which is Your Name, a movie that I hadn't seen until we were getting ready to do the show, and I have a very special guest this week, Tony Revolori, a friend of Screen Junkies when I was there. You've probably also seen him in Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, Grand Budapest Hotel, so many great movies, and we had a great discussion. So check the links down in the description below. We would love for you to listen to the audio version, download the podcast on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch it on the Showdown Entertainment Network. Also, please join me over on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. We are doing a lot of stuff as we wrapped up. We had a whole 31 days of Halloween that we did. We're getting ready for November. We have a movie club this week. The patrons chose the theme of our movie club, and it is Sean Connery films. So we're revisiting 4 films from Sean Connery's filmography. We're going to talk about it at the end of the week. I would love to have you join that club. And these are some of my producer level patrons that I would like to particularly thank. They have been so great, and they're such great supporters and fans and friends, and the discussions that we've been having about movies have been so great. I really would like to thank them, but also everybody that's joined me over at Patreon for helping to make this new endeavor of mine possible. Thank you so much for watching me here on YouTube. Be nice to each other, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.